That's fine. All right, I've gone on and started here. So, hey, I want to welcome everybody to the June 27, 2023 Eureka Texas Speaker Series. We've been doing this for a long, long time, and I guess close to 8 years. But we've have a great presentation here for you today. We have Nick Kittle is a very talented speaker, thought leader, coach, facilitator, best-selling author of the Sustainnovation, Building Sustainable Innovation in Government. And he's very talented, worked 15 plus years or more in government, and has directed a lot of different divisions, and founded one of the very first government innovation offices in the country. So very talented, and we're lucky to have him today. He's going to be doing a presentation on are the things we spend our time on are truly important? What's the real nature of risk? Do you know success and failure when you see it? This keynote will be, Nick will explain ways our brains play tricks on us, design us to keep us stuck in the muck, and unpack the nature of true risk, the way we've always done it. So I'm going to go ahead and let Nick take over here. We're really glad you're here with us. And Nick, take it away. And thank you all for attending today.
Brian, thanks so much for having me, and thanks, Eureka. Thank you for those of you out there coming from all over the U.S. to come join for this. I spent a lot of time in local government, public works, a variety of different roles, and for me, Chief Innovation Officer. But for me, it was about being able to help people visualize the data and help people see what's actually happening and see the things they can't see. And in a very different kind of vein, that's what I want to talk to you about today. So really excited to be here. And I want to kind of jump into this concept of rewiring risk and changing our mindset. What does that actually involve, and how do we go about doing that? Because this is a little bit of the next chapter of what I'll be talking about beyond sustainnovation in my career, which is we have this number, and I know we're probably data-driven folks because of what we do. And I love this number, 86,400. And lots of times I'll have folks guess, what is 86,400? What does that mean? What's that number actually good for? And it's good for this. 86,400 seconds is the amount of time that we have in any given day. And once we subtract out everything that we have to do, like sleep and eat and, commuting, biological functions, and all the rest of that stuff, what we end up with is about 50,000 seconds. So that's how much time you get every single day. We all get this non-refundable deposit every single day of 50,000 seconds. The question is, what are we doing with them, and how do we use it? It's funny because when we think about it in terms of this, I want you to think about it in terms of a bank account. And if you had $50,000 in the bank account, you wouldn't let somebody steal money from you, but we let people steal time from us all the time. That is something that we regularly allow. And so I want us to talk to us about this concept of 50,000 seconds and how we can live a little differently. But to do that, we have to do a couple things. One of the things is unthink what we think we know, because we think we know some stuff. Maybe, just maybe, the things that we already know might not be true and might be tricking us into living a little bit of a lesser life than we're capable of. And I want to turn that unthinking into upthinking. What are some things we can do to change how we go about living that better life? And what's that actually look like? So in unthinking, I want to talk to us about heuristics. If you're not familiar with the term, heuristics are the mechanisms by which humans learn. So it's the ways that we go about learning and shortcutting information to make decisions. And there's a whole branch on this. But what's interesting about the branch is we've learned that there's 184 different ways currently that we mentally shortcut things. This is obviously, I want you to read this and study it very closely. I'm just kidding. There's way too much on here, but you can see the overwhelming amount of heuristics that exist out there. But the idea is, how do we process different types of information? And so some of them, and the big four categories are, heuristics give us shortcuts on how we should remember things. I'll talk about what that looks like in a minute. How do we deal with things and make decisions when there's too much information? What about if we don't have enough context or meaning in a situation? How do we shortcut in order to come to decisions then? And what do we do if we have a need to act fast? So these are the mental shortcuts that we take. Those are the four major types of heuristics. And I'll give you a couple examples of what that looks like. Emotional heuristics. One of the examples of how this works against us is, for example, 9/11. After 9/11, a number of people, because of what happened there, took to the roadways in order to take their vacations. They didn't stop taking vacations. They just stopped flying for the next 2 to 3 summers. And they estimate that somewhere between 12 and 23 million more people hit the roadways. And as a result of that, 1,200 to 2,300 more people died. hitting the roadways because it is infinitely less safer for you to drive than it is to fly. But emotionally, we were reacting to the event of 9/11. And so we shortcutted that information, coming to the wrong conclusion about what is the actual right way to travel. So that's one way where an emotional heuristic can prevent us from making what's the most intelligent, best decision for us. Another one is the certainty bias. The certainty bias is that we strongly prefer as humans certainty over any degree of uncertainty. And you're probably familiar with this. If you give people options, they're going to go for the most certain option the majority of the time. Another variation of this is a thing called the disposition effect. I like this one because it helps us understand how it works against us in two ways. So for example, if I was to say to you, I'm going to give you a shot to roll a dice. And if the number comes up your number, you're going to win $600. Or you win $0 if it comes up any one of those other 5 numbers. However, I'll give you a chance just to take $100 right now if you want to. So would you rather take the guaranteed 100 or would you rather go after the guaranteed or the risky 600? The vast majority of people will say, I'd rather take the guaranteed 100. Now, if you flip the script and do it the opposite way, which is to say, you have to pay $100 in order to not roll the dice, and the odds are the same, people will tend to roll the dice to attempt to avoid taking a loss. So that works against us in two ways. When we buy a stock and we hold on to it for a while and then it starts to make a gain, we'll sell it before it gets really high. However, we'll take a massive risk when that stock starts to decline. We won't sell that. We'll just continue to hold on to it until it loses all its value. So that's another way that our brain tricks us into rethinking risk inappropriately. Another one you're probably familiar with is the concept of confirmation bias. People listen for information that already reinforces what they believe. It's very difficult for us sometimes to communicate with each other because we've got to go ahead and deal with confirmation bias and bust through that. And that's part of the challenge that we have, which is why we need to communicate about 3 times more than we think we need to in order for something to be received, because we're still having to penetrate through people's confirmation bias. But I'm sure you've encountered this before in your life as well. Again, listening for what you already believe is a confirmation bias. And if you can learn from that heuristic, you'll recognize yourself doing it more and more and maybe train yourself to hear objective truth. And relativity bias. We think that events that have happened to us are much more likely to occur to others. However, we also think that events that haven't occurred are also less likely to occur. So that is why it's difficult for us to maybe believe in climate change. And I know it's hot in Texas right now, and maybe that's relevant to you and maybe it's not, but I'll say in this moment, let's recognize that if you've never been through a heat wave, you're going to think it's probably pretty unlikely that that's occurring. So we've got to recognize that there are things, the river of our experiences work against us because we tend to overestimate the likelihood of events that have occurred to us and underestimate the likelihood of events that have not occurred. So again, our brain tricks us in all these different ways from observing objective truth. And if we can get better at seeing what's actually true, we're going to get better at living our lives. And that's what I'm after for us. So for me, it's about unthinking and using those heuristics to recognize there's a better way to learn. And that's what I want to get into with you. So let's just frame it through a lens for a second here. Is this a success or is this a failure? Is this a success or is this a failure? What do you think? And you can just comment in the chat here. I'm going to run through these relatively quick just in the interest of time. But how about this one, MySpace? You think it's a success or you think it's a failure? We all remember this one back in the day, right? Some of us were friends with Tom back in the day, and some of us have no idea what MySpace is. And I totally appreciate that as well. Was it a success or was it a failure? Or how about this one? TiVo. What do you think? A success or a failure? By the way, if you're doing thumbs up or thumbs down at home, I can't see you, and I really appreciate your participatory nature. Thanks for that. However, what is it, success or failure? Interesting story about TiVo. They actually owned the entire marketplace of recorded TV shows, but were too generous in how they licensed it out, which created the DVR marketplace. But they could have completely owned this. The ironic part is it's still a verb that some of us use. I TiVo'd that. So here it is. Most of us, I would imagine all of us, don't have TiVos, although I learned last time around that I was in a large audience. There was a guy in the back of the room and he had 2 TiVos and he was really proud of it. He was not selling, by the way. Or how about this one, Napster? For those of you who don't know what Napster is, which I now learned is a part of our audience as well, Napster was the original streaming music service. So they allowed you to pirate CDs tear the music off. And this is where streaming music came from. So it changed everything about how we operate. However, it was piracy, it was illegal, and it was eventually shut down. It did, however, change fundamentally how we do everything. So it's a bankrupt company. And at the same time, it changed our entire world. Or AOL, which is an interesting example. Success or failure. I have an MSN email address, which I know means that people give me a certain type of look because it's too old school. And the only people who get that stare worse than I do are those of you with an AOL address, which I'm sure some of you will proudly sound off on now in the chat. The point is, AOL has an interesting story as well, because the reason that CDs and then DVDs became the way that we consume that type of media is because way back in the day, in order to install AOL on a computer, you had to insert a CD and a CD-ROM. And then they standardized on that and say they sent out tens of millions of CDs around the world for installation of AOL, which then became the standard size for a DVD as well. Very few of us use AOL. I doubt you're jumping online using your AOL dial-up anymore. But at the same time, if you think about it, it changed the way that we, again, consume things. Or how about this one? The QR code. Success or failure? We had it on the opening slide already. Here it is, the QR code. So let's just consider for a second the story of the QR code. It was invented in the 1960s by Toyota Production Systems in order to manage their inventories. In the late 1970s, we tried to get it to catch on nationally as the original UPC symbol, those things we scanned, the barcodes on the back of packages. This was the original version, was a QR code, but it didn't catch on. The UPC ended up being the standard. In the 1990s, we tried to launch it again. There was a big effort underway to do that, but we didn't have the mechanisms to be able to do that. Again, in the mid-2000s, when smartphones came in, it was now capable of consuming it. And all it took was 60 years and a global pandemic for it to finally catch on. Is that a success or is that a failure? My point with that is, it depends. It's really hard for us to know whether something is a success or whether it's a failure in the moment. And I'm sure that's part of what you're trying to do in your roles, is to help people use that data and that information to determine whether something is a success or whether it's a failure. And what that looks like in the long run, not just these short-term immediate decisions, but what's the implications of this on a larger, grander scale. And that's the case. We don't always know in this moment, which makes us shepherds of really powerful information and storytelling, which is critical to our long-run success. And that's what I try and get communities to recognize, is that that's the value that they bring. They have to be responsible for the long-term consequences of what they do. They can't just be focused on the short-term pressures of these things, because success depends, and it depends on time. One of the questions I like to ask in my workshops is, what prevents you from being successful? And there are three things that come to the top of the list consistently. And here's what they are: imposter syndrome, perfectionism, and number one, fear of failure. These are the things that come up time and time again, 1, 2, and 3. But what these all are fear. Imposter syndrome is fear that you're not good enough, fear that you won't be able to excel or achieve in a given role. Perfectionism is a similar type of fear. It's the fear of judgment of others, that the product that you didn't produce is good enough. And of course, fear of failure is very clearly fear. So fear is this thing we don't talk about enough. We don't have these conversations in polite society. It's not something that we engage in meaningful discussion about. But one of the ways that I learned to deal with this is I've had a very different life experience. And so I tend to live a relatively fearless life. And it's because I want to tell you about the day that my 50,000 seconds didn't happen. You see, we get 50,000 seconds, that non-refundable deposit of time, every single day except for 2 days, the day we're born and the day we die. So I want to tell you about the day that I ended up with 31,200 seconds. You see, part of my story is I was dead at 35 years old. I was a public works director in Colorado Springs, and I flatlined. I have a very rare heart condition, as it turns out, and I flatlined for over 20 seconds, and it killed me dead. And I can tell you that in that moment, it was time to reevaluate how things were working. And I am 10 years now on the other side of what I call Life 2.0. And I want to tell you about what I learned about living a better life and some of how to actually make that exist. So this is my actual tape from that time. Now, that rare heart condition, there's nothing for me to do about it. So it will switch me off one day. No medicines, no transplants, there's nothing. So at any given day, it could be my last, which reminds me every single day to live it like it's my last. And one of those things that I had to come to terms with in the dark hours of the night with the mocking tick-tock of a distant clock to keep me company was this moment of the tombstone test. What would be written on my tombstone if I were to die today? And what I learned about myself was he really busted his ass at work would probably be what was written on that tombstone. But that's not what I wanted. And so I ask you to consider for yourself, what would be written on your tombstone if you were to die today? And if that's not what you want, we can do different. It's about how we spend our time to do that. Another thing I learned is that just because you know what you want to do with your life doesn't mean it's easy. The reason that you are where you are in an area of your life where you feel stuck maybe is because it's difficult to make that change. It's a fact that most people will stay in increasingly unhappy circumstances throughout the course of their life because of their fear of change, because of their unwillingness to step out and do those things. What I learned about that moment is that in order to do this, 20 seconds of insane courage is what's required to really jump out there off that ledge. And all you have to do is say exactly what you mean, need, or want, and let your heart speak without a filter for 20 seconds. Now recognize that when you do that, chances are somebody's feelings will be hurt. Otherwise, you would have done it before. But in that 20 seconds of insane courage, once it happens, you will be overcome by the desire to roll it all back. Do not do that. You have just done the most important step on that journey. But that's about reclaiming your space and allowing yourself to go ahead and recognize, I've got to do what I need to do in order to move this life forward. And that 20 seconds of insane courage is something I've used about 10 times in my life. And for me, they have produced immense value every time. And it's not easy. It's just how we go about doing it. The other truth is that people are invested in who you are today, so they won't understand the change that you're making. As we get into the change, it gets hard. It's just necessary, important work. And so as you get into changing your life, as you get into changing what you want to do, recognize the people, even people who have supported you up until this point, even your most vocal champions up until this point, they may disappear. People won't always understand the change that you're going for, and that's okay. They're invested in who you are today, not in who you're going to become necessarily. And so people don't always have maybe your best interests at heart as you go through this transformative change. And if you've ever done something like this before in any area of your life, you know that there were people that just didn't make it, that just didn't make the cut as you moved into the next chapter of life. That's part of this, is recognizing that it's okay that not everybody's going to be on your team as you go through this. That's normal. And the other thing I learned for me as I went through this incredibly difficult change, as I went through things like getting divorced, quitting my job, and trying to go ahead and spend my life living it with my daughter, more intent and purpose, and doing all of these different really important things, writing a book, stepping out. All of these things were incredibly important to me. And what it was I had to survive that change, because change is not easy. So we've got to recognize that even if you're ready and you know what you want to do and you've done some of the hard work, it's still going to be hard to make the change. This is how I survived the change. For me, I watch 300 sunrises or sunsets a year. That's my goal. Every year I try and watch 300 sunrises or sunsets. And these are some photos that I've taken through the years. And for me, that's how I survived the change. 5 minutes in the morning to recognize that the sunrise is about hope. No matter how dark the night was, you can choose every single day what today's going to look like. And the sunset's about reflection, taking the time to celebrate that win you didn't get to at work. You know what happens? You go, you have that big win, you get a project across the finish line. Nobody celebrates enough with you for the level of effort you put in. Take time at the end of your day to just experience that and feel the hard things, that gut punch that happened in the middle of the day that you didn't get to process. If you spend 5 minutes at the end of the day reflecting on that, you don't have to carry it around as baggage. And so I learned that 5 minutes at the beginning and 5 minutes at the end of the day, if you can do it, is really helpful for reframing your existence and surviving the change that you're going through. Whatever your habit is, running, gardening, whatever it is, pick a 5-minute habit and do that. It'll make your life feel better. One of the other things that my mom has accused me of throughout the years is drive-by humanity. And I believe that this is one of those transformative things we need to do more of with each other. It's that interaction that we have in the coffee shop with somebody where you genuinely compliment them on their blouse or their shoes or something like that. And all of a sudden it brightens or changes their day. That little innocuous, friendly comment is what we need more of in this world. And we don't do enough of it. I found that actually intentionally doing this, creating moments where you can pay somebody a genuine compliment, even just in passing, changes fundamentally the way the fabric of the universe works. I don't know how that works, but what I do know is it does. How can you engage more drive-by humanity? Is that a good use of your 50,000 seconds today? I ask you to consider. Another thing I want you to think about is making peace with your past, not so it doesn't impact your future, because your future is an unknown, anxiety-ridden place, but so it doesn't impact your present. Look, anybody out there not screwed up ever? If you are, leave it in the chat and then leave the call, because nobody wants to hear that nonsense. Okay, but we've all made mistakes. You apologize, say you were wrong, say you were sorry, do what you need to in order to make peace with that past so that you can live the life you want to be living and need to be living today. And this is the experience that we need to be present in, is today's 50,000 seconds, because it may be the day that it's 31,200 seconds before you flatline in that day. And the other thing I understand after all this is that time is completely misunderstood and people don't know how to use it. First of all, time is both a fact and a feeling. We know exactly down to the second. It's set by an atomic clock. We know exactly what time it is right now. Some of you are looking at your phones, looking at your watches. We know exactly what time looks like now, but it's also a feeling. It's a feeling as well, because if I say you're going to go stand for a line in an hour at the DMV, how long does your time last? Now, let me try this out. You're hanging out with your friends on the weekend. How short does 1 hour feel? So we've got to recognize that time is both a fact and a feeling, and you can use that to your advantage. We just don't practice it. The other thing is it's linear and defined, but it is not equal. It comes in these sort of measured chunks. We know what that looks like, but not all time is equal. You don't know what a moment means until it becomes a memory. And so we can be intentional in moments to slow them down or to speed them up. One of the techniques I like in terms of slowing down a moment is when you're in a moment that you want to remember or want to extend, pull yourself out of the moment for a second and try and notice 3 to 5 details around you that nobody else is noticing. Maybe there's some sort of, something with the vent on the ceiling that's weird, or maybe there's fraying of the carpet in the corner of the room that you're in, or maybe there's a little dot on the wall that you never know. Whatever it is, notice things that other people wouldn't notice. And by doing that practice, it'll help cement that moment for you and help to turn it into something that you're capable of extending and interacting with for a longer period of time. The other thing we can do is to zone out. When we get into those moments where standing in line at the DMV is a great thing, that's where we got to be. Well, guess what? We can go ahead and fuzz out on ourselves and try and get into a place where we're scrambling our own brains a little bit. Music's a great way to do that, and something else. Throw yourself into another distracting activity while you're there. But let's recognize that time is a fact and a feeling, and it is misunderstood, but we only get to live it once. Again, that's why that's a non-refundable deposit of 50,000 seconds. These ain't rollover minutes, my friends. We get that deposit at the beginning of the day, and if you don't use them by the end of the day, we don't get to roll them over. It's just a new day. So let's recognize that we've got to use that time in the best way possible. Another thing I find is a curiosity that I fully understand at this point is that no one's in charge of our happiness except for us. I hear a lot of people who blame others for their lot in life or point at others who make them unhappy. Nah, that's nonsense, my friends. You allow them to make you unhappy. Once you start by pointing the finger here about your happiness, you'll be a lot happier. The other thing we got to recognize about happiness in general is that you're happiest when you're doing things that you love to do and making time for that. So it's not about the things you're not investing in. It's about the things you are investing in and making the time invested in the correct place. That's why that tombstone test is so helpful. It's not that you're not getting enough of a break, which there's some truth to that too. But maybe you're just not getting enough time in doing the things that you love to do, which is different than taking a break. It's why you can go on vacation and maybe not feel fully satisfied because you just relax the whole time. Sometimes you go on vacation and you make those memories, you have those interactions, you engage with something that you love to do, you explore your passions more, and you feel more well rested from that experience, more engaged, more energized, happier than this. I also want you to recognize that there's another heuristic at play here called the hedonic treadmill. Our brains make us unhappy in weird ways. So one of the tricks of the hedonic treadmill is that we compare our experiences in life to relative experiences, not absolute experiences. So for example, if I asked you to think about that first boyfriend or girlfriend, remember you were 14, 15, 16, whatever it was, whenever that happens, and you remember that heartbreak you felt when you broke up, that first true love, and maybe you're still with them. If you are, congratulations. But if not, remember how raw that felt back in the moment. And now chances are when you think about it, you go back to that moment, it's like, we're not feeling the same pain that we did back then because we've moved on. We've had other experiences to compare it to. Or maybe you've gotten a promotion recently and you got that $10,000 raise or that new job title that you've been waiting for. And when you got that, how did you feel? Elated. A week after, you're still pumped up. You got that raise, you got that thing. It's 6 months later. It's 9 months later. How do you feel about it now? Chances are like, what have you done for me lately? That's the hedonic treadmill at work. So the idea is that you always need to get more in order to feel the same level of satisfaction. Whereas if I asked your 16-year-old self how you feel about your age now and how much you're earning, you would probably be thrilled with yourself. So let's recognize our brain's playing a trick on us right there. The other thing is it allows us to slip into more unhappy circumstances without paying attention until it's too late. So if I have a bad experience in life, and then next time somebody crosses my line, my personal boundaries, and then somebody crosses my next personal boundary, it's like, well, it was just a toe across the line. It wasn't that bad. And then they put another toe because there's a new line, and then another toe. And then pretty soon you're looking way back at the line at which you started. That's the hedonic treadmill in action too. Well, it was a little worse than yesterday, but it's not that bad. By the time you're 6 months into it, it's bad. So let's recognize that. And if you know that it exists and you're feeling unhappy, check in with yourself about whether that's real or whether that's your brain playing a trick on you. Because in reality, you might actually be happier than you think you are if you know that this thing is trying to trick you. At any rate, moving along, don't compare yourself to others and don't judge them. You have no idea what their journey's been about. It's a trick and a challenge sometimes, but we got to recognize that you haven't lived somebody else's life. Judgment is a waste of time, and so is comparison. Both of them steal your joy from you and injure your ability to relate with others. I was once, when I ran, which I don't like to do anymore, but I did back in the day, I was running on a beach in Hawaii, and I'd run a pretty significant distance. I was really proud of myself. And just as I was getting ready to turn around, this guy passed me who was about 3 decades older than I was, and he was cruising along. And just as I'm processing this moment, he runs right in front of me, runs down the beach, goes jumping in the ocean, starts swimming like a madman. And in that moment, I'm like, what the heck just happened there? I get back to my buddy's place and I'm thinking about this the whole way back, and I tell him the story, and he says to me, Nick, I just want you to know something. He's like, that guy is fitter than you will ever be. Side note, he's also richer than you'll ever be too. So and he was not wrong. There was the Ironman decathlon in town or whatever. So yeah, you got to be rich to be able to do that too. All I'm saying is you don't know what journey somebody else has been through. So quit comparing your life to others. And here's one of my favorites. What other people think of us is none of our damn business. I'll be honest with you. This is important. I can't make you think anything about me. I can just be the best me that I can be and show up in the best way I can and hope that you like it. But I can't make you think anything about me. So it's a lot easier once I stop caring about that. Now, don't get me wrong. I want you to like me. That sounds great. But what you think of me is not my business. And so I have to turn loose of that. And once you start to recognize that, it gets a lot easier to interact with others because those opinions of who you are matter less. And consider the source. If this person's not a happy person, why on earth would you care what they think about you? Haters gonna hate. That brings us to the Taylor Swift law, my friends. Right? You are not universally popular, nor will you ever be. You are not pizza. You are not chocolate. Okay. So let's remember at the end of the day, does this guy feel British to you, by the way? He feels British to me. I don't know. But haters are going to hate. Not everybody's going to love how you roll. And once that's okay with you, it'll start to be more okay with others. And that's one of those things that just makes life a lot easier to operate in. Taylor Swift law, now you know. And if you're one of those rabbit hole thinkers out there, which I used to be one person who would play out all the possibilities and probabilities and that kind of thing. Just recognize it's okay not to know all the answers. It's okay to stop thinking so much. The answers come in time. So when we get faced with that, just recognize you don't have to know all the answers. It's okay to take a moment and process it and figure something else out. As I show you this photo right here, how does it make you feel? For many of us, as we look at this photo, it's probably a little nerve-wracking, maybe a little terrifying even. But what I want us to recognize about this is, and this is a road I'm on. Let me just paint this for you. I'm in Colorado. I am 13 miles off of a paved road going down this road through the forest. I have no cell signal, and this is what I'm looking at. This is not as bumpy as it's been, but it's the safest spot I could take a photo in. How do you feel now? Nervous? A little scared? Maybe you're just fine with it. Maybe these are the roads you used to grow up on. Whatever it is, let's recognize that what this actually is the unknown. I don't know where this goes. I don't know what happens next. That's what this feels like. And that is the moment that we're in. What we're in right now is fog. We're the great abnormal, friends. We don't know the path forward. We have not had to deal with what we've dealt with now. And so let's recognize that the unknown is just the unknown, because you have to go down a road like this sometimes in order to end up with a picture like this. One of the things that I love to do is take photography and astrophotography. I like to hike 14,000 foot mountains. And one of those things is you got to go down roads like that. You got to face and embrace the unknown in order to be able to do things that are truly spectacular. And let's recognize that the unknown is not good. It is not bad. It is just unknown. And the more you get comfortable existing in the gray, the more comfortable you are in the fog, the better off you'll be, because you're going to see opportunities that others don't see. Again, remember that heuristic up front. People want certainty. So people will try and get whatever the certain outcome of, even if it's not in their best interests. So let's recognize that. And when you feel that heuristic coming on, recognize I'm just dealing with my fear of the unknown. And it's okay to embrace the unknown. Does it work out in your favor every time? No. But you're smart, capable, intelligent humans, and you're going to find your way out of it. So just know that. And the other thing I see a lot is binary thinking, us versus them thinking. It's maddening. My question to you is, are you a Texan? Or maybe you're just from your community. Or are you a member of the United States of America? Or are you a Republican or a Democrat? Or are you whatever race you are, whatever gender you are? My point is, we divide ourselves in so many ridiculous ways. Archbishop Desmond Tutu said, our differences are not designed to alienate or separate us from one another, but to teach us our need for one another. And I very much believe in that. But I'll say this to you, since we like to divide ourselves, I'd like to throw out some random ways that we might choose to divide ourselves other than what we usually use. You know, let's go ahead and spread a little division today, shall we? How about this? We're a map-based crew, right? How about this? What am I saying here? Is it caramel or is it caramel? Where is it at? I'm from Carmel, Indiana. You can see right there that that's how we say it, caramel. But in the South, we got into look at that. You know, Texas is a little red and a little blue. That's a debate happening up in there, y'all. What about this one? How about crayon, crayon, cron? I mean, it's crown. I guess there's all these different pronunciations I wasn't aware of. Which one's yours? Is it crayon or is it crayon? Just saying. What about this one? You guys, y'all. Down south, it's y'all. I learned that because I came from you guys, and when I moved to Oklahoma and spent time in Texas, I learned y'all. And by the way, I teach others, by the way, that it's all y'all is the proper plurality of y'all. Because people will be like, oh, I was talking to a group and y'all. Nope, that's all y'all. That's how you say it properly. So there it is. We know. Or this one. This is a controversy waiting to happen right here. Look at this. What is happening in St. Louis? In St. Louis, it's soda. You better say soda, you know, but here it is. Now it's down south. That's a Coke you're having. How many of you are my Coke people? Totally random and arbitrary things. But let's remember that we choose arbitrary things to divide us. And that which unites us is greater than that which divides us. The truth is we're all members of the human race. The truth is your one kind comment can change the trajectory of somebody's life. Your drive by humanity can make people live a better existence. And isn't that kind of what we're all here for? Shouldn't that be part of the point? So just recognize when you get that chance to find your coalition of the willing, the people on this call are on your team. You're dealing with a challenge, put it out to this group. Let them help you solve what you're up against. And smile, my friends, because you don't own all the world's problems. It's okay to smile. You can sustain optimism as long as you got gratitude. And if you don't know how to smile, I'm going to teach you how to smile. We're going to take a pen, you take it, and you put it in your mouth like that for 1 minute. It tricks your brain into feeling happier because it forces you back into a smiling position. So if you're not feeling happy, take a pencil, put it in your mouth like that. Yes, risk looking utterly ridiculous if somebody decides to walk in, but put that pencil in your mouth. You will feel happier after 60 seconds. Swear to you. Feel that, give it a shot, but smile, because not every rock is a backpack that you got to pick up and carry around with you, okay? The other thing I've learned is we're not good with simultaneous incompatible truths. That's what I call it. But there are things that exist at the exact same time that we're not good at dealing with. Michael Jackson, yeah, you know what? I love his music. Incredibly talented artist. Also a creeper. There is no way to not make that real true, okay? So, I mean, that's true on both levels. The other thing is that we care about the level of fame that somebody has, apparently, before we decide on that, because we canceled R. Kelly for the same stuff. All I'm saying is, guess what? We don't like simultaneous incompatible truths. Somebody with so much talent who's an absolute pervert or whatever, right? In this case, the ozone layer is another example of that. Did you know that we are effectively stitching up the ozone layer? We've done that in the 1980s. That was going to be the thing that killed off our generation, my generation. And in fact, what we've done is by banning the chlorofluorocarbons through the Montreal Protocol of 1987, we banned 150 different chemicals. And by virtue of that, the ozone hole is stitching up. One of them will be fully stitched by 2030, the other by 2060. And guess what's happening? As a result of that, it is increasing the rate of localized climate change. It was like an open window, which was causing UV to get in. But once we shut the window, now we've got a hot boxing car going on here. So that's an incompatible truth. We stop these things, but we're not good with that. So recognize in this moment that it might not be good or evil. It might not be black or white, but we live at any given time multiple incompatible simultaneous truths. And we as humans do not like that. We like black or white. We like cut and dry. We don't like things that challenge our perception of that thing. And people don't get on board with what you're doing until after you're successful. They're not coming out of the woodworks at your darker moments to go ahead and get on your team. And you've probably experienced this in your work life multiple times. But once you start to produce the results, you create momentum, people want to get on board. And my advice to you is let them. Let them. I used to be more of may the bridges I burn light the way kind of guy. And what I learned is it's much more effective to build that coalition along the way by allowing people on your team as you start to win. And all of this has led to a wildly different life for me. I wrote a best-selling book. I have mentored and connected hundreds of local government and technology professionals with their true purpose in this life, jumped out of a plane, made my living as an artist for a year. I've hiked now 23 of the 14,000-foot mountains. I am living my life and I love every single minute of it. But this is what I learned after dying. And this is why it's so important for me to share this message with you all, because I don't want you to learn that lesson the hard way. I got a second shot at this. I don't know that I'll get a third. And so for me, I'm trying to live that life the way that it creates the most meaning. And what I want to leave you is that unthinking, that rewiring of risk, we turn it into upthinking and how we level up our lives. So I want to teach you a couple of those things that I know about upthinking to help you level up in life. So let's talk about that forever job. How do you find your forever job? There's three things you need for this in order to do this. And this has been something that I've been talking with many, many folks across the country with here on a regular basis, but this seems to be a really important topic as people are hopscotching jobs. What's happening though is people moved a lot of jobs, but they didn't get happier. 6 months later, they're feeling the same level of disappointment. And it's because they weren't looking at some of the right things. Here's how you find your forever job. You figure out what your gift is, you identify what's your real currency in this world, and you check in with your credibility. So how's that work? What's your gift, you ask? Well, first of all, you probably have several, but here's how you figure it out. What is it that you do better than almost anybody else with little to no effort? Whatever those things are or that thing is, write it down. Write down everything that you think of that falls under that category for you. That's your gift. That's what you're here to do. Find your real currency. Your real currency is about what fills your cup. What is it that when you do it, you feel more empowered, you get more energy from it than something else. So for me, as an example, I like the light going on in somebody's eyes. I like seeing that. It made the virtual experience incredibly difficult for me. But what I realized in that is that that's how I get paid without money. This is the payment of my soul in what I do. And so for me, there's only a couple different roles I could take on in this world and get paid in my real currency. I used to be an accountant back in the day. I'm good with numbers. I used to be an engineer. I'm good with numbers. I'm good with math. I could be a public works director. I could do the same thing. The catch was it didn't get me paid in my real currency. So no matter how good I was in those fields, I couldn't get the thing I was really seeking. I could be a teacher. I can get paid in that. I could be a trainer. I could be a speaker. Those are fields that pay me in my real currency. So what is your real currency? Write that down as well. And then we check in with your credibility. Do you have the experience? Do you have the skills? And do you have the reputation to actually be credible in that? Now, we tend to work, and this is how I look at it right here. You'll forgive the rudimentary drawing, but I'll say this. This was part of the genesis of the idea was I have 3 coffee cup rings, which you probably can't notice because I drew lines over them, but part of how my brain works is I draw stuff like this. That overlap in the middle is where it's at. What happens is we tend to work in a place where we have a gift. And if we're good at our careers, between our gift and our credibility, the thing we don't check in on is our real currency. So if you overlay your real currency along with your gift and your credibility, what we can do is find fields that will actually allow you to do your best and to thrive in that field while getting paid in your real currency. Then we overlay money on top of that as the last condition. Sometimes you need to create a position. Sometimes the position already exists. If you don't have the credibility because you don't have the skills or the experience, you might take what I call a pivot position. Get a job that's more closely related to the field you want to go into, recognizing that you're going to do 3 years of time to be able to do this. I wanted to write the book Sustainability on Sustainable Innovation in Government. I was one of the pioneers of local government innovation across the country. But in order to be credible in the space, I did 3 years in county government in an entirely different location to test out the principles so that I can talk intelligently about this. I needed to boost my credibility. I needed to boost my skills and my experience and my reputation in order to make sure that when I did jump out on my own and wrote the book and started the business, I was credible. So I just want you to see that for yourself. If you can find your gift and write that down, if you can find your real currency and write that down, and you can figure out how your credibility works with those 2 things, you're going to find the potential forever job, leaving you happy and satisfied and meaning coming out of the work that you do. Another way to upthink is this concept here, Mary Jane's Last Dance. And so I want to tell you about this real quick, which is this lady, and this is a picture of my car being hit. I was at a gas pump. And what happened is I'm sitting here and getting ready to put the pump in, my car gets jammed backwards because the lady who was at the pump in front of me had moved backwards and backed into my car. And I'm sitting here and I'm late to pick up my daughter and I'm having one of those oh shit moments. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh my goodness, what is happening here? And I go up and I'm getting ready to be angry because it's like, what the heck? It's a gas pump, lady, come on. And the lady who's getting out of the car, she's old. And I can tell in that moment that she doesn't know where she is. She's still got the gas. She's still got the nozzle in the tank itself. And she gets out of the car and she's confused and she apologizes. And then about 30 seconds, and I'm like, it's okay, let's get it figured out here. Like, and I'm working with her. And then in 30 seconds later, I turn around to get the nozzle out of the car, really, she's getting back in the car and trying to drive again because she can't remember while she's there. We get the EMTs, we get folks there to go ahead and call the police and to call the medics. I stayed there with her because there were multiple times along the way she tried to shift herself back into gear. And in that moment, we recognized this is her last drive. So for me, as I'm doing this, I'm sitting here thinking, this is the last time, and her name was Mary Jane. Mary Jane, this is her last drive. She will never drive another automobile after this. And it reminded me of this. There's all these things that we got to do in a day. I got to empty the dishwasher. I got to go pick up the kids. I got to get that report done. But the reality is you got to turn got to into get to, because there will be a day when you retire and you don't got to do that anymore. You don't get to do that anymore. There will be a last walk. There will be a last time you empty the dishwasher. There will be a last time you drive, just like Mary Jane. So that whatever it is you're thinking you got to do, take a moment and think about the fact that, you actually still get to do this. And that's a good upthink, I think, into terms how we look at it. And again, you can upthink your time. You can increase the quantity or increase the quality. I talked about one of those ways that we increase the quality of time, which is making sure that we're putting our time to valuable ends. We know our tombstone test. We understand what that looks like. We're taking care of ourselves and putting on our oxygen mask first. We're going out and making sure we understand this, but we can also increase the quantity of time. Look, I told you we got 50,000 seconds in a day. You know how to get more time? Sleep less. I know that's not conventional wisdom. I know that's not conventional thought, and I know people may disagree with it, but I'll be real with you. People who accomplish a lot of great things, they have more time. They wake up earlier. They get up at 4 a.m. and go out and do the practice before they get in at 5 a.m. to the office to go out and do the things. You can train yourself to do this by adding 15 minutes or reducing the amount of time you sleep by 15 minutes. So you can actually change your sleeping patterns. You get used to it. I'm going to tell you right now, I sleep 4 to 5 hours a night, and that works for me. I have been an insomniac. I know what sleeping 1 to 2 hours a night looks like. When I sleep 5, I feel good. It's a trick to train your body to do it, but once you do, you have more life to live. And there's a truth to that. And if you can learn to change those moments, the quality of those moments by noticing those things around you that others don't notice, you're going to be better off. You're going to increase not only the quantity, but the quality of the time as well. So that's upthinking. So in this moment, I just want you to turn them into us. How can you invite more people into your team? How can you stop arbitrarily dividing that? How can you take the coalition of the willing, the folks on this call, and make them part of that team? How can you turn got to into get to today? How can you take that thing that you're dreading or that you hate and maybe recognize you're still here? You still get to do this. And it's a different way of looking at that. Get off your hedonic treadmill. Recognize your brain is trying to play tricks on you to make you less happy. And if you know that, you can be happier. I've taken both Harvard and Yale's happiness courses. And one of those things that just is a common thread is people's quality of relationships and how they spend that time and what that looks like, and figuring out how to turn off our brains when it comes to this hedonic treadmill. Critically important things for us to actually be more objectively happy in our lifetimes, and take time and turn it to your advantage. Invest that 50,000 seconds better. If I said to you, somebody comes up to you at the coffee shop, is it worth your time to go chew out that person for 6 minutes? That 360 seconds of your time, is it worth it to you to do that? Is that a good, valuable investment of your time? If it is, hey, my hat's off to you, but just be intentional about how you have it. Don't allow others to steal your time. The people who are stealing your time in meetings by letting them run over or not getting to the point, they're stealing your time. And if somebody was stealing your money, you would say something about it. Don't allow people to steal your time. Guard it with the same level of jealousy that you do that as well. So when it comes to this concept of 50,000 seconds, I just want to ask you this, and I just want you to think about it for me. What's one thing that you're not going to allow others to do anymore? What's one thing that's going to gain time back in your life that you're just going to stop doing because it doesn't create value for you? How are you going to take your time back? And that's what I want you to think about. So that's my time with you today. If you'd like here for a second, either screenshot this or take a picture. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. If you QR codes, right? We made it 60 years later. We got it there. But if you want to grab that phone and scan it, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. And I have one more exciting bit of news to share with everybody here in Texas in particular, which I'm excited about, which is this. I am launching a very unique micro conference event in Allen, Texas. I announced it yesterday. There is a $100 off code on the bottom, but I'm partnering with Harry Sue of Slappy Daddy Barbecue, Grand Champion Pit Master. You've seen him on the Food Network. He and I are co-tag teaming to do barbecue, teach people how to cook amazing barbecue, and also teach people leadership, life, basically how we build great teams. That is going to be a workshop, a 2-day workshop that we do in Allen, Texas on August 29th and 30th. So if you're looking for a great team building event that's a little bit of work, a little bit of life, and some just awesome barbecue in the middle, come join us for that. And we'd love to see it's the Beyond the Smoke at beyondthesmoke.net. We'd love to have you. Reach out, and I'd love to be able to join you for that. And I want to say thank you to everybody for speaking to you today. And I thank you for your time. I appreciate that. Turning it back over.
Nice job, Nick. We really appreciate the presentation. It's pretty fantastic. I got to go check and see if I still have an active AZOL account now. You've got me thinking on that one. But Courtney, do we have any questions in here? I'm going to go ahead and look back through, but if anybody has them, go ahead and put them into the chat. We've got about 5 minutes here, but a fantastic presentation.
Yes, thank you, Nick. And Rafael Hernandez had asked, how do you deal with people that don't want to change?
You move around them. There's, you recognize the folks that you go after first are the folks that are willing, open, and able. And there are people who don't want to change. Your options are to go through them directly, which is going to be difficult, or to move around them and minimize their ability to impact what it is you're trying to do. And if that's in the work environment, that would be my advice to you is how can I move around them or get this issue outside of my direct department or get it over to another group so that I can find a workaround, or to have that moment in that 20 seconds of insane courage to say, this isn't working. This isn't working for me like this. Here's how it's going to work going forward. And here's how I show up. So my experience has been you either go through them or you go around them. But that's the experience I've had.
Hey, Nick, I got a question here. This is Brian. But what's some good polite ways to tell someone that you're not going to let them steal your time? Like in a meeting, I've got to excuse myself for this. Do you have any go-tos?
Usually I'm very clear. You're absolutely great question, Brian. Usually I'm clear about it up front and just say, I've only got an hour today, so we really need to be on time. And then I've already built in my thing. But the other thing I do, Brian, is I try, and when you schedule a meeting with me, it's typically 45 minutes or 20 minutes. I don't do an hour-long meetings, and I try not to do 30-minute meetings just because if I do 45 minutes, you can be present with me the whole time and you can be off your device and still make your next meeting and return your emails because you got 15 minutes at the end. So I like to schedule shorter meetings as a way to do that, or I just clarify it up front. And if somebody's wasting my time and it was unexpected, usually it's just one of those things where it's like I look to whatever's around me to make the excuse, like, oh my goodness, it looks so hot outside. We should step out there and just derail the topic and move outside. So I find
Nice.
derailing is a good way to do that.
Yeah, my daughter's calling. So yeah.
I'm so sorry. I got to take this. Yeah.
Nice. Courtney, we have any more questions?
I didn't see any more.
You see any more? This is a great presentation. I really appreciate it. For everybody on the call, if you do think of a question, let us know. And Courtney, if we could put our email here for Eureka, Texas into the chat. By all means, if you have anybody in the room with you that needs a PDH, send us their first name and last name and their email. We want to make sure they get credit for this fantastic presentation. I think I saw at max we had 70. That's pretty darn good in the summer vacation months. So I'll take it. It was a good one. We're going to be cleaning this thing up, and we'll put the video online at our YouTube site, the Eureka, Texas YouTube site. And but Nick, hope you have a good rest of your day, and thanks a bunch for sitting with us today.
Thank you, Brian, and thanks everybody here for what you do. I appreciate and honor you, and I am on your team if I can ever help with anything. So thanks for your time, everyone.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Nick. And you have lots of really insightful thank yous here in the chat as well. So we really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next month for augmented reality. It will be a good one. So please join us again in July. And until then, enjoy we're giving you 2 minutes back. We're not stealing any time. We're giving 2 minutes back of your day. So take care, y'all.